My name is Arwen, and in 2020, I thought I had it all figured out. At 28, I wasn't rich, but I was steady. I worked in the nightlife industry in Las Vegas, bartending, managing, and saving every dollar I could. In a city that eats people alive, I was surviving. More than that, I was building something for myself. And then, there was Ryan. He was smooth, handsome, and confident, the kind of man who could walk into a casino and draw every eye, not because of money, but because of charisma. I thought he loved me. I thought he saw me. We'd been together for over a year. He told me he dreamed of starting a business, maybe a lounge of our own. We'd call it the Haven, he'd whisper at night, tracing patterns on my arm. I believed him. So when he asked me about my savings, about the $40,000 I'd managed to put away after years of grinding shifts, I trusted him. He told me it was temporary. I'll invest it, flip it in a week, and we'll be one step closer to our dream. But in Vegas, trust is the most dangerous gamble of all. The night I found out, I was closing the bar at 3 a.m. My phone buzzed with a casino alert, linked to my name, my account, withdrawals, thousands at a time. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. I called him. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. Panic clawed at me. I rushed to the casino floor, the place where Neon never sleeps, and there he was. Ryan, my Ryan, sitting at the high-limit blackjack table, stacks of my money in front of him. His face was flushed, his hands trembling as he doubled down, desperate and reckless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him, but my voice caught in my throat. I just watched, frozen, as dealer after dealer pulled his fate from the deck. And then it happened. One hand, all of it, gone. He slammed his fist on the table, then stood swaying and stumbled away. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't coming back to me. He wasn't going to explain. He wasn't going to apologize. By the time I caught up to him in the lobby, he was gone, disappeared into the neon night, leaving me with nothing but the echo of my own stupidity. That night, I sat in my car, staring at the glittering skyline of Vegas. My chest was hollow, my face streaked with tears. All my savings, my trust, my future, gone. But as the sun began to rise, something inside me shifted. The grief was still there, raw and sharp, but beneath it, a spark ignited. If Ryan thought he could vanish into the city that never sleeps, he was wrong, because no one betrays me and walks away clean. I didn't sleep that morning. Instead, I drove down the strip, my eyes scanning the endless glow of neon, the casinos buzzing even as the sun rose. Vegas never rested, and neither could I. My savings, years of sweat and sacrifice, were gone, but Ryan wasn't, not yet. I started where I knew he'd been, the casino where he lost everything. The pit boss eyed me cautiously as I approached the high-limit area. Looking for someone, he asked, his voice flat. Yes, Ryan Blake. He was here last night. The pit boss smirked. Oh, I remember him. Thought he could beat the house, lost big, then ran like a rabbit. Humiliation burned in my chest. That money was mine. He shrugged. Then you should have kept a tighter leash on your boyfriend. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I swallowed my rage and turned away. The next stop was the hotel we sometimes stayed at, a cheap place off Fremont Street. The clerk flipped through records, chewing gum loudly. No Ryan Blake here, not in the last week. Each dead end twisted the knife deeper. Had he left the city? Was he gone for good? By afternoon, exhaustion pressed down on me. I sat in a cafe near the strip, staring at the people around me, tourists laughing, dealers shuffling cards, dreamers chasing fortunes they'd never see. And me, the fool who trusted a gambler. I nearly gave up then, but fate had other plans. As I sipped my bitter coffee, a woman slid into the seat across from me. She was sharp, with short blonde hair and eyes that cut like glass. You're looking for Ryan, she said flatly. I froze. How do you know? She smirked. Because I used to look for him too, until he drained me and vanished. Her name was Clara. She had her own scars. Ryan had borrowed money from her under the promise of big wins and never paid her back. He's a leech, Clara said bitterly. He moves from one woman to the next, bleeding them dry. Vegas is his playground. My stomach turned. So where is he now? Clara leaned in, lowering her voice. Word is, he's at the Mirage, trying to sweet-talk his way into another high-limit table. But the casinos are catching on. He's sloppy. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt the spark of control return. If Ryan thought he could play me, play Clara, and keep running through Vegas, he was wrong. I stood, my fists clenched. Then it's time to end his game. But Clara grabbed my wrist. Careful. Men like Ryan don't just lose gracefully. If you back him into a corner, he'll fight dirty. I looked her dead in the eyes. Good. Let him. I'm ready to fight. That night, I headed toward the Mirage, the lights blazing like fire against the desert sky. My heart hammered, but my steps were steady. Ryan Blake was still in this city, and I was going to find him. The Mirage's lights were blinding that night, painting the desert sky in gold and crimson. I stepped through the glass doors, the air conditioning chilling my skin, and scanned the casino floor. It didn't take long to find him. Ryan, my Ryan. He sat at the bar, laughing, whiskey in hand, his arm draped casually around another woman. She was dressed in glittering sequins, the kind of Vegas siren who looked like she belonged in neon. My stomach twisted. All the nights we'd shared, all the whispered promises, they meant nothing to him. He had already replaced me. I walked closer, my pulse hammering. Clara had warned me he'd fight dirty, but seeing him with her, so carefree, was worse than any fist. Ryan, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. He turned, and for a moment, his smile froze. Then he recovered, smirking as if I were just another fan in the crowd. Arwen, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? I hissed. You stole my money, my life savings, and you blew it all like a coward. The woman beside him looked confused. Ryan? What is she talking about? Ryan chuckled, shrugging her off. Don't listen to her, babe. She's crazy, obsessed. My fist clenched. Obsessed? You emptied my account, Ryan. $40,000. Gone. Do you have any idea what that money meant to me? He leaned closer, his smirk cruel. It meant opportunity, and I took it. That's what Vegas is about, taking risks. You were just too soft to understand. The woman stood, her face twisting in disgust. She threw her drink at him and stormed off. Good. At least one person saw the truth. But I wasn't finished. I grabbed his wrist before he could slink away. You're not running this time. He yanked free, lowering his voice. You don't get it, Arwen. That money's gone. And so am I. Walk away before you get hurt. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a warning, like he had friends, protection. And then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed two men watching us. Tall, suited, silent. They didn't look like gamblers. They looked like enforcers. Ryan smirked again, slipping toward the exit. The men followed, their eyes lingering on me. Clara's words echoed in my mind. If you back him into a corner, he'll fight dirty. I stood in the Mirage lobby, fury boiling, fear wrapping around me like smoke. Ryan wasn't just a selfish gambler. He was tangled in something bigger. And if I wanted revenge, I would have to outplay not just him, but whoever was backing him. The Mirage's neon glow still lingered in my eyes as I stepped back onto the strip. My hands trembled, not from the desert night chill, but from fury. Ryan wasn't just a thief. He had backup. And not the kind you find in bar fights. The kind that made people vanish in the desert. Clara found me a few hours later at the cafe we'd met in. She slid into the booth, her expression sharp. You saw them, didn't you? The men in suits, I muttered. They were watching him, watching me. Clara nodded grimly. They're not casino security. They're debt collectors. Ryan owes money, big money. And if he doesn't pay, they'll use anyone connected to him as leverage. The realization made my stomach knot. I wasn't just betrayed. I was marked. I whispered. So he didn't just steal from me. He gambled it away trying to pay someone else. Clara leaned closer. Exactly. Ryan's been playing this game for years. Every woman he meets is another bankroll. He uses us until we're dry, then he vanishes. But now, he's in too deep. Word is, the casinos are close to blacklisting him. And when that happens, his little game is over. Her words sparked something dangerous in me. If I could push the right buttons, I could make sure Ryan wasn't just blacklisted. He'd be finished. That night, I started my research. I called in favors from bartenders, dealers, and security guards I knew from years in the industry. Vegas may be big, but its underbelly is small. Piece by piece, I built the puzzle. Ryan was tied to a loan shark named Dario Vega, a man whose name carried weight in whispered conversations. Dario's crew didn't forgive debts. They collected them, one way or another. Ryan wasn't just my betrayer, he was theirs too. The more I uncovered, the clearer my path became. If I exposed Ryan to the casinos, they'd cut him off. If I exposed him to Dario, they'd come for him themselves. But the thought of leaving it all to them felt empty. I wanted him to see me, to know it was me who pulled the rug from under him. I wasn't satisfied with him just being punished. I wanted revenge with my name on it. The next evening, Clara and I tailed him. He was easy to spot, strutting into another casino with false confidence, a new woman on his arm. I gritted my teeth. He didn't even look haunted. He was still playing, still conning. But that night, luck wasn't on his side. We watched as security quietly escorted him from the VIP table. He argued, cursed. But they took his chips and led him out like a child. Clara smirked. He's close. They're starting to shut him out. I watched him disappear into the neon night, fury and determination burning together inside me. He thought Vegas was his playground, but he hadn't realized he'd created his own trap, and I was going to be the one to spring it. I learned quickly that Vegas runs on paperwork and whispers. If you want someone erased here, you don't just shout it into a bar. You file it in a ledger, present it to a risk manager, and make sure every pit boss in the city knows the name. The house doesn't care about drama. It cares about liability. So I started where the money left, the transaction logs. I called in favors the way you call in chips, carefully, with timing. A bartender I'd covered shifts for once slid me a cracked phone with a video he'd taken. Ryan at the Mirage, his hand shaking as he keyed in transfers on a phone under the table. A dealer I'd covered for once passed me a torn-out slip. The timestamp blurred, but the account number clear. A security guard gave me a tip. Check the backdoor registries and comp logs. High-limit players who cash out early often leave a trail. Every scrap I assembled began to look like a map. I printed it all, 3-ringed it, labeled pages in bright markers until the folder looked like a weapon. My hands shook the whole time, not from fear, but from a cold, wired focus. This was work. This was leverage. This was the exact opposite of the numb helplessness I'd felt in the lobby that first night. Clara came through again. She had a cousin on the floor at the Bellagio, a chip runner who owed her one. He slipped a photocopy of Ryan's player history into my purse between deals. Dates, buy-ins, comp withdrawals, and the line item for a cash advance coded to a third party. The pattern built itself. A trail from me to his phone, from his phone to offshore transfers, from offshore transfers to gambling credit. "You sure you want to do this?" Clara asked one night, eyes narrowed. We sat huddled beneath a strip of neon in a diner, plans spread across the table like contraband. "Yes," I said. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. Make him untouchable at the tables. She touched my hand. And the people who back him. I'd thought about Dario every step of the way. About the men in suits who followed Ryan that night. About the way Ryan had sounded. Like somebody else's fear lived in his throat. "We lean on the casinos first," I said. "We push his access to credit, strip him of comps, get his name on the blacklist. When the house refuses him across properties, he can't borrow to play, and his balance collapses. Then Dario is forced to collect. And he'll make mistakes. He'll show. We don't necessarily have to go to him." Clara frowned. "You want him to get hunted. That's cold." "It's fairness," I said. "He took my savings. He gambled with my future. I'm going to make sure he feels the weight of that." We started small, one risk manager, curious and bored, who agreed to a meeting for coffee if I promised confidentiality. I showed him the folder like a prosecutor opens a case file. Numbers, photos, video stills, timestamps. I explained the transfers, the inconsistencies, and the fact that a customer had been using someone else's account. I didn't beg. I pointed. The room got very small while he counted reputational risk in his head. "You want this across properties?" he asked quietly. "I want him barred," I said. "I want him to be a name they won't let through the door." He needed proof. So did the compliance teams. So I gave them everything I had and then some. I arranged meetings with the compliance heads at 3 major properties over the next week, timing each conversation so the pressure rose like the house edge. Each manager took copies. Each manager promised to check their ledgers and reach out to their counterparts. And then, like a line of dominoes, it happened. One by one the calls came in. He tried to buy in at high limit, refused. Card denied at the pit. Comps blocked. Security flagged him for unusual activity. Flagged him system-wide. The casinos are competitors in every other way, except on fraud. They share lists. They share a code. I remember sitting in my car the night the first call came through, fingers white on the steering wheel, listening to Clara whisper, "They kicked him out." I laughed, a little insane with relief. The thrill of seeing the plan work pulsed under my ribs like a second heartbeat. But Vegas isn't a chessboard with only pawns. My moves had been loud. I had started a ripple, and ripples become waves. 3 nights after Ryan received his first wholesale refusal, Clara called me, voice ragged. "They trashed my door," she whispered. My place was ransacked. Nothing's missing but my laptop and my cousin's phone. "There's a note." They said I should stop. I drove over faster than I'd ever driven, lights cutting the dark like knives. Clara's door was a splintered mess. The place smelled like someone had rushed through with intent, not theft. Drawers overturned, drawers slammed back, the TV still tuned. On the kitchen table lay a scrap of thick paper with one sentence scrawled in heavy black ink. "Stop playing with Dario." No signature, no politeness, just a threat. I pulled myself together, palms slick. "Did you call the cops?" I asked. She shook her head. "I can't. Not if they figure I talked." Her eyes were wide and wet. "Arwen, they know." In that moment, I realized the scale of what I'd done. I had lit a fuse. I had turned invisible bureaucratic pressure into a personal war. And now the people who collected debts were sending messages. I clenched my jaw. "We don't stop," I said, the words brittle and steady. "We get smarter, we get witnesses, we get cameras, we stop running blind." She nodded, swallowing. "Okay, but be careful. This isn't one man anymore." That night, I lay awake thinking about the briefcase I'd once pictured opening. A business plan, a lease, lights up on our name. Instead, I pictured a ledger and a list of names. I pictured Dario and a city that eats the careless. The path forward had grown teeth. Revenge had a price, and now I could see the bill. The morning after Clara's place was ransacked, I woke with my jaw clenched and a plan forming like frost on a window. Cold, precise, and hard to scrape away. If the underworld answered to muscle and fear, then I would answer with law and paper. The casinos listened to ledgers. The city listened to reports. The ones who hired muscle answered to subpoenas and police reports. Sometimes reluctantly, but they answered. I started at the small claims desk the way you start a fight, with paperwork. I filed a formal claim against Ryan for theft and fraud, listing dates, transactions, and witnesses. I reported the withdrawals to my bank and demanded fraud investigations. I sat with a police detective and watched his face as I showed him the video from the Mirage, the timestamps, the comp logs, evidence that this was no simple breakup. "People get scammed here all the time," he said, half sympathetic, half bored. "But you've got something concrete." That sentence felt like a match struck in dry grass. The detective opened a file, wrote a report, and promised to do what he could to trace transfers. It wouldn't be instant. It wouldn't be clean, but it was a start. Next, I went back to the compliance officers, this time not as a desperate girlfriend, but as a woman with a legal claim and a police report. Names carry weight when the state backs them. I asked for formal logs, for internal audits, for anything that could be subpoenaed. The third manager I spoke to, an older woman who had seen the industry change, looked at me like I was finally a player at the table. "You drag it into paper, you make it immortal," she said. "Bring me their accounts. I'll push a formal inquiry." Paper had teeth, it turned out. The week that followed blurred into a frenzy. Subpoenas issued to offshore payment processors, compliance teams sharing logs across properties, and a small legal notice that pinged Ryan's phone. Attempted service, returned undeliverable. He'd gone off the grid. Predictable. Infuriating. Then Dario noticed. That was the part I hadn't been able to fully imagine. How fast a ledger could turn into a target. One late afternoon, as I stepped out of the courthouse, 2 men in cheap suits fell into step behind me. They didn't say hello. They walked with the confident economy of someone who knew how to make a presence count. "Ms. Blake," one of them drawled, using Ryan's name like a weapon. I kept my face neutral. My pulse ran a tight wire under my skin. "Arwen," I said. The taller one smiled thinly. "You're making waves, sweetheart. People don't like waves." He reached inside his jacket and showed a glint Small, like metal. My brain cataloged it too quick. Not a gun, maybe a knife, or a paperweight used as threat. The point wasn't the object. The point was the threat. "Tell your boyfriend to stop running," the other man said. "Or we stop his friends." The world narrowed to the scrape of shoes against pavement and my breathing. My first instinct was to run. My second was to call someone. Alvarez, the detective, Clara. My third was sharper. I stood my ground. "You don't scare me," I said, which sounded braver than it felt. They laughed and walked on, their laughter like a closing door. I didn't move until they were gone. Then I sat on the courthouse steps and shook. My hands felt foreign. I had pulled legal pressure into the fight, and the people who collected debts had heard the sound of legal teeth and come smelling for blood. That night, Clara refused to sit at home. "You did it, Arwen. You hit a nerve," she said, pacing. "Now what? Do we run?" "No," I said. The word came out harder than a promise, like the crack of a cue ball. "We fortify." We bolstered safety protocols. Cameras on Clara's door, a locked safe at my apartment, an emergency contact chain that included the detective and 2 friends who would call 911 at the first sign of trouble. Alvarez connected me with an attorney who specialized in small-dollar fraud and emergency protective orders. Within 48 hours, we filed for a temporary restraining order against Ryan and anyone acting on his behalf. The judge signed it in a blink. Formal papyrus that might not stop a bullet, but would complicate someone's job if they tried to act overtly. Still, legal paper only slows monsters who work in the dark. The next blow landed closer. Clara's cousin called, voice trembling. He'd been roughed up in an alley behind the Bellagio, told in no uncertain terms to stop helping me. The phone line clicked dead. The image stuck in my head like a splinter. I wanted to meet Dario in the dirt, to tell him exactly what I thought. Instead, I did the only thing that was truly mine. I kept building the case. The subpoena returned records that showed Ryan's accounts routed to shell entities associated with Dario's operation. The detective called it useful. The attorney called it nasty. I called it relief. But relief tasted like iron. Every document that proved I was right also drew their attention like a flare in night. The more legal weight I amassed, the more their methods turned from intimidation to escalation. A week later, Clara didn't come into the cafe. Her number went straight to voicemail. Her doorbell was motionless. My stomach knotted like a trap. I drove to her place. The living room light was on, curtains drawn, but no Clara. On the table, where we'd once planned revenge over cheap pie and neon coffee, lay a small wet envelope. A single playing card, ace of spades, slapped inside. No note, no fingerprints. A message without words. I slid my finger over the slick ink and felt something colder than anger, a calculation. They knew where to reach me. They knew how to talk in language I had no defense for. That night, as I lay awake with orders filed and subpoenas stamped, I realized the truth in a way that was both clarifying and terrifying. The path I'd chosen would not be walked alone. It would split. It would put other people in danger. So I made a different decision. I wouldn't be reckless. I would be meticulous. And if they wanted a war, I would make sure the battlefield was public. The next morning, I drafted a press statement with Alvarez's help. Concise, fact-based, and devastating in its simplicity. If Dario wanted me silenced privately, then I would make sure the city and the law watched him in the open. I hit send. The press release hit like a flare. Phones buzzed. Reporters called. Local TV wanted an on-camera interview within the hour. The city that mostly ignores one woman's heartbreak suddenly cared about one woman's evidence. I let it. I had crafted the statement to be tight and factual. No melodrama, just dates, transactions, and names. That precision made it hard to dismiss. Within a day, the story spread from gossip blogs to morning news and into the hands of the casino compliance teams I'd already tapped. For the first few hours, the reaction felt righteous. Emails from reporters came with polite requests. A morning anchor read my press release live and framed it as a potential citywide scandal. The detective called to say his department logged new leads. Clara texted heart emojis and a gif of us fist-bumping. Small human things that steadied me. Then the other side moved. Dario doesn't operate with press releases. He operates with bone and fear. Within 48 hours, the subtle threats became explicit. Clara's car was keyed from hood to trunk. Someone spray-painted her building with a warning in black paint. A stocky man in a cheap suit shoved a note under my apartment door. "You made a mistake." I felt the air shift. My legal filings were working, but they'd lit a bonfire nobody wanted. The city watched. The underworld burned. I met the detective at a diner across from the courthouse. He was practical, not sentimental. "You pushed the right buttons," he said, sipping coffee. "You also woke a hornet's nest. We're increasing patrols, but these guys move fast." "Can you protect Clara?" I asked. My voice was small for once. He didn't smile. "We can try, but when someone like Dario decides to retaliate, it's messy." Messy came in the form of a late-night call. Clara's cousin had been jumped behind the Bellagio. He needed stitches. He wouldn't talk on the phone. He wouldn't give names. Fear had a language of silence. The next day, I went on camera. Under the bright lights, I read the facts again, calculated, unemotional, final. I watched the anchor's eyebrows raise. I felt something in me unhinge and reset. There was no going back. After the segment aired, my inbox filled with tips. A woman emailed a photo of Ryan leaving a private poker game with a man who had a snake tattoo on his neck. A dealer sent a screenshot of a group chat where Ryan bragged about covering a debt. The city was noisy with evidence. But then I received a different kind of message, a short, clipped voicemail on my phone. A man's voice, calm and amused. "You should have left it to the house, sweetheart. Now everyone's looking. And once everyone looks, someone will take what they want." The line clicked dead. I reported it. The detective asked if I wanted an escort. I declined. Stubbornness is a kind of armor when you're afraid. I told Clara to stay with family out of town. She agreed, but her eyes told a different story. She stayed. 3 nights later, the attack happened. Not on me. This time it was Clara. I got the call in the middle of the night. Broken glass, screams, the sound of someone being dragged. I drove like a madwoman, light slicing through the desert dark. When I pulled up, police had the scene. Clara's front window was caved inward, the living room a ruin. She sat on the stoop, bruised, hair matted with dust and blood. She held a shard of a mirror like a talisman. "They wanted us to quit," she said, voice raw. "They wanted me to stop talking." I knelt and touched her shoulder. "We don't stop." My lips tasted like iron and gravel. "We go louder." We went louder. The next morning, I flooded social feeds with pictures. Clara's damaged door, the note, the voicemail transcript. I sent copies to the detective, to the newspapers, to the compliance managers with the tight subject line. Escalation, threat to witness. Pressure is a tool that works both ways. The casinos began to move faster, freezing accounts and expanding internal audits. Lawyers called offering help. The city had to respond. A woman beaten on a stoop made them look bad whether they wanted it or not. But Dario escalated too. The men in suits stopped acting like shadows. They showed faces. A burly man with a snake tattoo, just like in the photo, started appearing at the edges of my world. Outside the diner where I met the detective, near the valet where I parked, once outside Alvarez's office. He never stepped in, never made a scene. He simply watched. His presence changed the rules. Fear was no longer vague. It had a chin and a scar. Alvarez urged caution, then strategy. "We force this into the light," she said. "We don't give them the darkness. We subpoena everything. We demand a hearing, an emergency injunction to compel the casinos to produce records and to assign witnesses protection." We filed. The judge set a hearing for the next week. It was the opening we needed. Public, legal, and unavoidable. If we could get the judge to order the records, the trail would become undeniable. If the courtroom forced compliance, Dario's men would have less room to operate. On the morning of the hearing, I walked to the courthouse feeling both a soldier and a target. Cameras clustered like birds around the entrance. My phone vibrated with messages, some supportive, some fearful. I pushed through the crowd and stepped into the marble coolness. At the top of the courthouse stairs, a black SUV idled with its engine ticking. The burly man with the snake tattoo stood by the passenger door, lighting a cigarette as if he owned the morning. He saw me. He smiled without warmth. A line of photographers raised their lenses. Cameras flared. I felt the world narrow to one point. Him, the cigarette. The way his eyes slid to the courthouse doors like he'd already calculated my exit. Then he turned and walked away, toward the alley on the courthouse's side. 2 other men fell in step behind him. My phone buzzed one last time. A text. "Nice speech today. Hope you like making headlines." I climbed the marble steps. The doors closed behind me. The judge called the courtroom to order. The hearing began. But when I glanced up at the gallery, my heart stopped. The burly man with the snake tattoo was seated 2 rows back, like he belonged there. The courtroom smelled of old wood and nerves. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but reporters clustered outside like sharks. Inside, the marble walls and stiff-backed benches gave the illusion of order. But for me, it felt like a war zone. Ryan was already there. He looked smaller than I remembered, sallow, jittery, his suit a size too big. But his eyes still carried that smirk, the one that had once charmed me and now curdled my stomach. Beside him sat a lawyer in a slick gray tie, the kind who knew how to twist the truth until it screamed. Behind them, in the gallery, sat the burly man with the snake tattoo. He leaned back, arms folded, smiling faintly, watching me. The judge entered. Everyone rose. My chest thudded like a drum. The hearing was to decide if the casinos must hand over full logs of Ryan's transactions, and whether a temporary injunction could freeze his assets. It wasn't the trial, but it was the step that could turn whispers into records, records into headlines, and headlines into justice. When my turn came, I stood. My folder felt heavy in my hands. I laid out the timeline, the transfers, the casino slips, the video of Ryan using my account without consent. I spoke slowly, steady, the way Alvarez coached me. At first, the judge listened, expression neutral. Then Ryan's lawyer jumped in. "This is a bitter ex-girlfriend," he said smoothly. "This is drama dressed up as fraud. My client had permission to access those funds." My throat tightened. Permission. The word tasted like ash. I forced myself forward. "Permission," I said aloud, my voice trembling but clear. I gave him trust, not a blank check, and he turned it into debt. Debt that now ties back to men in this very room. The courtroom shifted. A murmur rippled. The judge banged his gavel. "Order!" The lawyer smirked. "Your Honor, she's making wild accusations. She's trying to drag my client into her paranoia about organized crime. Unless she has proof?" "I do," I cut in. My hands shook as I held up the subpoenaed documents. Ryan's offshore transfers, the shell entities tied to Dario Vega. It's not paranoia, it's pattern. He gambles, he loses, he borrows. And when he runs out of women to bleed, he turns to men like Vega. For a split second, silence. Then the lawyer demanded the documents be stricken. Ryan muttered, face pale. The judge flipped through the papers with sharp eyes. "Counsel," the judge said slowly, "if these records are valid, we have a serious issue." In the gallery, the snake-tattooed man shifted, his gaze drilling into me. My spine went rigid. The judge ordered a recess to verify the documents. The gavel cracked, and the room emptied into chaos. As I gathered my papers, Ryan brushed past me. His whisper was poison. "You think this makes you safe? You just painted a target on your back." Before I could answer, he was gone, his lawyer on his heels. I turned to see the man with the snake tattoo still in the gallery, still smiling. Only this time, he lifted his phone and snapped a photo of me. The flash of that camera phone haunted me all night. I kept replaying the moment, the burly man with the snake tattoo sitting 2 rows behind me, lifting his phone with casual menace. The message was clear. We see you. We have you. The hearing's outcome was delayed. The judge ordered verification of the records before making a ruling. But for me, the damage was instant. I walked out into the Nevada sun with reporters shouting my name, and all I could feel was the weight of eyes that weren't friendly. Ryan avoided the cameras, slipping into a car with tinted windows. I caught his face once through the glass, pale, twitching, like the walls were finally closing in. That should have satisfied me, but it didn't. Not yet. Clara met me outside the courthouse, her arm still bruised from the last attack. She squeezed my hand. "You rattled him," she whispered. The judge saw it. The casinos saw it. Everyone saw it. "Yeah," I said softly. "And so did Dario." That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in a motel on the outskirts, one of those cheap places where the ice machine rattles and the neon never fully works. I sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more steps I could take before the ground gave out. My phone buzzed near midnight. A text from an unknown number. You're making enemies, sweetheart. Hope you've got more than paper to protect you. I deleted it, but the words burned anyway. The next morning, Alvarez called. We verified enough to keep the injunction moving. The judge will likely freeze Ryan's accounts pending review. But listen carefully. The men behind him won't let that go quietly. You need protection. I need closure, I said, my voice brittle. Alvarez sighed. Arwen, this isn't just about revenge anymore. It's about survival. Survival. The word echoed. That afternoon, Clara and I tracked Ryan again. He'd lost his polished swagger. He looked hunted, darting glances over his shoulder, chain-smoking in alleys between casinos. We followed him from a distance until he staggered into a side entrance of a mid-tier casino off the strip. Inside, the place smelled like cheap cologne and desperation. Ryan sat at a small poker table, his hands shaking as he shoved chips forward. He wasn't winning. He wasn't even pretending anymore. I stood in the shadows, my heart pounding. Clara leaned close. He's cracking. And he was. His mask had slipped. He cursed loudly when he lost, slammed his fist on the table, drew looks from security. The smooth con man who once charmed me was gone. All that was left was a desperate addict circling the drain. I almost pitied him. Almost. But then, as if on cue, the snake-tattooed man appeared at the edge of the room. He didn't speak. He just watched Ryan. Watched him lose. Watched him sink deeper. Ryan saw him too. And in that instant, the smirk vanished. Fear painted his face, raw and real. I leaned closer to Clara. He knows it's over. We left before the table broke apart, before Ryan noticed me watching. But as I stepped out into the desert night, the thought followed me. Ryan's downfall was in motion. Yet my revenge still wasn't complete. Because it wasn't enough for him to be hunted. He needed to see me, to know it was me who lit the match. And soon, he would. It happened 2 nights later. I had gone back to the Mirage, not to gamble, but to watch. Surveillance from the shadows had become my second life. The dealers, the pit bosses, the tourists. They all blurred together until one face surfaced like a nightmare. Ryan. He looked wrecked. Hollow eyes, shirt wrinkled, a smear of ash on his sleeve. The smooth charmer was gone. He was bleeding out in real time, one bad hand at a time. And then he saw me. Across the crowded floor, his gaze locked on mine. His face froze, then twisted with something between rage and realization. He pushed away from the table, chips scattering. Arwen, his voice cracked, but it carried. Heads turned. I didn't move. I let him come. He staggered across the casino floor, the crowd parting around him like he was contagious. His breath reeked of whiskey when he reached me. It's you, he spat, grabbing my arm. It's you doing this. The blacklist, the papers, the cops, it's all you. I met his glare, steady. Who else would it be? For a second, the mask of anger slipped, and I saw it. Fear, he knew. He knew the casinos were done with him, the law was circling, and Dario's men were closing in. And worst of all, he knew I was the one who pulled the strings. You ruined me, he hissed. No, I said softly, leaning close enough for only him to hear. You ruined yourself. I just turned the lights on. He staggered back like I'd struck him. His voice cracked into a laugh that wasn't a laugh at all. You don't understand, they'll kill me. Then maybe, I whispered. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. A commotion erupted near the bar. 2 suited men appeared. Different from before, younger, meaner. They scanned the floor like hunting dogs. Ryan's eyes went wide. It's Dario's crew, he muttered, panic flooding his face. He grabbed my wrist tighter. You have to help me. I ripped free. No, Ryan, you made your bed. His lips trembled. Please, if they take me, I'm dead. Arwen, I'll do anything. But I was already walking away, my pulse roaring in my ears. Behind me, the chaos swelled. Ryan shouting, the men closing in. Casino security moving like sharks to contain it. I didn't look back, not once. When I stepped outside into the desert air, I felt something I hadn't felt since this began. Power. Ryan finally knew the truth. And now his fear would finish the job I started. The night after the Mirage, Vegas felt different. The strip was still alive with neon and noise, but for me, the city had shifted. I wasn't just walking past casinos anymore. I was moving through a battlefield. Ryan was hunted now, and I had made sure of it. Clara called me the next morning. He's in hiding, she said. Word is he owes Dario more than he can ever pay back. They're looking for him everywhere. I pictured him darting through alleys, glancing over his shoulder, feeling the same gnawing fear I'd lived with for weeks. For a moment, I almost felt a twisted sense of justice. Almost. But Clara's voice was tight. Arwen, if they can't find him, they might come for us instead. We're the message. We're the warning. The truth of it made my chest tighten. My revenge wasn't clean anymore. It was spreading, messy, tangled in the city's veins. That evening, I went back to the courthouse for a follow-up hearing. Reporters swarmed. The judge ruled to keep Ryan's accounts frozen and ordered the casinos to cooperate fully with compliance. It was a victory on paper, but as I left, a note was shoved into my hand by a stranger in the crowd. It read in block letters, "Stay out, last warning." I folded it carefully, slipping it into my folder as if it were just another exhibit. That night, Clara and I parked outside a rundown motel after hearing Ryan was holed up there. We watched from the car, the air thick with cigarette smoke and tension. Through the window, Ryan paced like a caged animal. His hands shook as he made frantic calls, but no one answered. "He's done," Clara muttered. "He's circling the drain." But as I watched him, another thought burned inside me. Done isn't enough. He needed to know exactly who held the match. I stepped out of the car. Clara hissed, "Arwen, no!" But I was already walking. I knocked on the thin motel door. A pause. Then Ryan's voice, broken and hoarse. "Who is it?" "It's me," I said. The door cracked open. His face was pale, sunken, desperate. When he saw me, his jaw dropped. "You? God, it really is you. You did all this." I didn't answer. I just stepped inside. The room smelled like sweat and failure. Clothes piled in corners, a half-empty bottle of bourbon on the nightstand. "You don't get it," he whispered. "They're going to kill me. Dario's men don't forgive. They don't forget." "You should have thought about that when you gambled away my life," I said. He sank onto the bed, burying his face in his hands. "You want me dead?" "No," I said coldly. "I want you exposed. I want everyone to see you for what you are." He lifted his head, eyes bloodshot. "Then you've already won." I turned to leave, but the door swung open before I touched it. 2 men filled the doorway. One of them was the burly man with the snake tattoo. Ryan went white. Clara gasped from the car outside. And I realized, in that instant, my revenge had collided with Dario's justice. The room was about to explode. The air in that motel room was heavy, stifling, electric with danger. Ryan froze on the bed, his hands trembling. His lips parted in a whisper. Dario's men. The snake-tattooed man stepped inside, followed by his partner. Their presence filled the tiny space like wolves stepping into a cage. The taller one smirked at me. Well, looks like we've got an audience." Ryan shot to his feet, desperation dripping from his voice. "I can get the money, I swear. Just give me time." The snake man chuckled low. "Time ran out weeks ago, Ryan. Dario's patient but not generous. You knew that." I stayed near the door, my pulse rattling my ribs. They hadn't acknowledged me as a threat yet, but their eyes flicked to me, calculating. Ryan pointed at me suddenly, his voice frantic. "She has it. She's the reason all this happened. She's got the files, the evidence, the cops. She's the one you should be worried about." His betrayal burned fresh in my veins. Even in the final hour, he would sell me out. The snake man's gaze hardened, pinning me. "That true, sweetheart? You stirring the pot?" I swallowed, forcing my voice to steady. "I didn't take his money, he took mine. All I did was shine a light on it." For a moment, silence. Then the partner laughed. "Sounds like she's got more backbone than you, Ryan." Ryan lunged toward me, wild-eyed. "You have to save me. Tell them I'm good for it." I shoved him back, my voice cold. "I'm not saving you, Ryan. Not now. Not ever." The snake man stepped closer, his shadow falling over us both. "Here's the deal. Dario doesn't care who's crying, only who's paying. You've embarrassed him, Ryan. You've made him look weak, and people who make him look weak don't last." Ryan collapsed back onto the bed, his body shaking. "Please," he begged, voice cracking. "I'll do anything." The men didn't move. They just stood there, letting the fear sink in. I realized in that moment that this was it. My revenge had delivered him to the wolves. But as the men turned to drag him up, Ryan clutched my wrist with the last shred of his strength. "Arwen, don't let them, please." I ripped free, glaring into his eyes. "This is the end you earned." The The snake man smirked at me, as if amused by my resolve. Smart girl, knows when to step aside. They hauled Ryan to his feet. He screamed, kicked, begged, but it didn't matter. The men were immovable. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched as they dragged him through the door, his voice echoing down the corridor. Clara's car headlights cut through the night outside. She stared at me from behind the wheel, her face pale, her hands tight on the steering wheel. And in that silence, I felt the weight of it. My revenge was no longer an idea. It was real. It had teeth. But as Ryan's screams faded into the desert night, a question lingered like smoke in my chest. Had I taken back control? Or had I just handed my soul to the darkness? The motel hallway echoed long after Ryan's screams had vanished into the night. Clara drove us away in silence. The city lights blurred through the windshield, neon bleeding into the desert black. My body was still, but inside, my mind roared like a storm. He was gone, dragged out of my life by the same greed that consumed him. And I had let it happen. Clara's voice finally broke the quiet. Arwen, did we just watch him die? I stared out the window. We watched him face what he built. Her knuckles whitened on the wheel. That's not an answer. I didn't reply. Because the truth was clawing at me. I didn't know if he was dead yet, or if he would live another day in Dario's grip. But either way, he wasn't free. And neither was I. That night, back at my apartment, I found another note under my door. No envelope this time. Just a single sheet of paper. You're finished too, if you keep pushing. D. I held it with trembling hands. Ryan's downfall hadn't tied off the thread. It had tangled me deeper. The next morning, Alvarez called. The case is moving. The casinos are cooperating now. But Arwen, there are whispers. Dario doesn't like his name in court records. You need to be careful. Careful? I said bitterly. That word's too small for what I'm in. She paused. Then what are you in? I didn't answer. Because how could I explain it? Revenge was supposed to be clean. A wound stitched shut by justice. Instead, it felt like I'd opened a vein and let the city drink. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow outside my window looked like a man waiting. Every sound in the hallway made my chest tighten. Clara came over with takeout, trying to shake the mood. You did what you set out to do. Ryan's finished. That should be enough. But I shook my head. It's not enough if Dario still thinks I'm a problem. She studied me, her eyes heavy. Then what are you going to do? I looked at the wall of case files spread across my table. Ryan's name buried among transfers and debts. All of it tied by strings to one bigger name, Dario Vega. My revenge had ended Ryan, but now it was pointing me toward something bigger. I whispered it aloud, like a curse and a vow. I'm going after Dario. Clara dropped her chopsticks. Arwen, no. But it was already too late. The fire had started. The decision settled in my bones like fire. I was going after Dario Vega. It wasn't enough to see Ryan dragged away. That was just the prelude. The real cancer was bigger, richer, and crueler. And it sat in a penthouse above the strip, untouched, untouchable. Clara paced my apartment, her voice sharp with fear. Arwen, listen to me. This man isn't Ryan. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't leave trails. You're not fighting some washed-up gambler. You're picking a fight with the city itself. I spread documents across the table, financial links, whispers, and depositions. Casino whispers Alvarez had passed along. Red string crisscrossed like arteries. At the center was one name, Dario Vega. I've come this far, I said quietly. I can't stop now. You can, Clara snapped. You just won't, and that's going to get you killed. I met her eyes, steady but tired. Maybe, but at least if I go down, I won't be silent. She sank into a chair, defeated. You've changed since Ryan, since all of this. It's like revenge is the only thing keeping you breathing. I didn't argue, because she was right. That night, I found myself on the rooftop of a parking garage overlooking the strip. From there, the lights looked endless, like the city was pretending to be alive. Somewhere in those towers, Dario sat like a king. My phone buzzed. A message from Alvarez. Careful, Arwen, you're on his radar now. I typed back. Good, that's where I want to be. The next day, I slipped into a casino Dario was rumored to own a stake in. Not one of the big flashy ones, but a quieter place where money moved under the table. I sat at the bar, nursing a drink, pretending to be another face lost to Vegas. But my eyes watched the VIP lounge upstairs, where a bouncer twice my size guarded a glass door. Through the smoky glass, I saw him. Dario Vega. Gray suit, silver watch, hair slicked back. He wasn't flashy, not like Ryan. He radiated control, power. Every gesture was measured, every smile calculated. He laughed with two men at his table, then glanced toward the bar. For a terrifying heartbeat, his eyes landed on me. Cold, sharp, curious. I turned away quickly, my pulse hammering, but deep down, a thrill ran through me. Because finally, I wasn't chasing shadows anymore. I had seen the man who owned my nightmare. And he had seen me. The moment our eyes met, I knew. Dario Vega had noticed me. I left the casino that night with my pulse racing, every step echoing louder than the strip's neon hum. Clara was waiting in the car, her face pale when she saw me. "You saw him, didn't you?" I nodded. He saw me too. She cursed under her breath. "Arwen, this isn't a game. You don't just see Dario Vega and walk away clean." But I didn't feel clean. I felt marked. The following days blurred into a dance of shadows. I visited casinos linked to his empire, blending into the crowds while watching who entered the VIP lounges. I listened to bartenders' gossip, slid questions into harmless conversations, traced the flow of cash like invisible ink. And always, I felt eyes on me. Sometimes it was a man reading a newspaper too long in the lobby. Sometimes a woman in sunglasses at night, never ordering a drink. Sometimes just the flicker of a camera lens. Dario's empire had noticed me circling, and like any predator, it didn't like being circled. One night, after hours of staking out a casino, I returned to my apartment to find the door unlocked. I froze. Inside, nothing was stolen, nothing broken, but the air felt wrong. On my kitchen counter sat a single item, a playing card, the Queen of Spades, and written across it in sharp black ink, "Your move." I sat down hard, my breath shallow. Clara arrived minutes later, eyes wide as I showed her the card. "He knows Arwen. He knows everything." "I wanted him to see me," I whispered. "I just didn't think he'd play back so fast." She grabbed my shoulders. "Then stop. Stop before it's too late." But the fire in me wouldn't let go. "No," I said. "This is the moment. He's watching. That means I'm close." Clara shook her head, her voice breaking. "Close to what? Justice? Or close to ending up like Ryan?" Her words cut deep. And in the silence that followed, I realized the truth. I wasn't just chasing revenge anymore. I was inside Dario's game now. And the only way out was to win. The Queen of Spades burned in my mind all night. Your move. I barely slept. By morning, exhaustion and adrenaline had fused into something sharp, something dangerous. If Dario wanted a move, I would give him one. Clara thought I'd lost it. "Arwen, listen to me. This man doesn't bluff. If you try to hit him, he'll hit back 10 times harder." "That's fine," I said, voice flat. "I'm done hiding." I spent the day combing through files Alvarez had slipped me unofficially. Old court cases, business filings, whispered testimonies. Buried in it all was a pattern. Shell companies laundering money through casinos, then funneling it into construction projects across Nevada. And tied to each of them was the same name, Vega Holdings, LLC. It wasn't just gambling money, it was real estate, politics, foundations. Dario didn't just own casinos. He owned the ground Vegas was built on. So I crafted my move. That evening, dressed sharp and steady, I walked into a charity gala at one of Dario's smaller casinos. Alvarez had secured me an invitation under the guise of community outreach. The chandeliered ballroom glittered with donors, judges, politicians. And in the center, laughing with a senator, was Dario Vega. The sight of him chilled me and fueled me all at once. I waited until the cameras flashed. Then I moved. A reporter I'd tipped off earlier spotted me, slid close, and whispered, "You sure about this?" "Yes," I said. "Roll it." He lifted his mic as I approached Dario. "Excuse me, Mr. Vega. What do you say to allegations that your holding company launders money through casinos?" The room froze, heads turned. Dario's smile barely faltered, but his eyes sharpened into knives. He chuckled, smooth as silk. "Allegations? That's news to me. Maybe you should ask my lawyers, not my cocktail server." Polite laughter rippled, but I didn't move. I stepped closer, my voice steady, clear. "I've seen the filings. I know about Vega Holdings. And soon, the court will too." The flash of cameras lit the room. Gasps spread. For the first time, Dario looked at me fully, No charm, no mask, just cold calculation. He leaned in, whispering so low only I could hear. "Careful, little queen. The board you're playing on? I built it." Then he walked away, leaving the air sliced clean behind him. Reporters swarmed me, firing questions. Clara pulled me out before security could. My heart was hammering, my legs barely working. But inside, a spark flared. For the first time, I had struck him in public. I had put a crack in his mask. But as we drove away, Clara gripped the wheel so hard her knuckles went white. "Arwen, you just declared war." And she was right, because that night taped to my apartment door was another card. The King of Spades. And across it, written in blood-red ink, check. The King of Spades sat on my kitchen table like a curse. Check. The message was clear. Dario Vega wasn't just aware of me anymore. He was answering. 2 nights later, I felt his first move. I was driving home when headlights flared behind me. Too close, too bright. I switched lanes, they followed. I sped up, so did they. My palms slicked against the steering wheel. The strip faded behind me as I turned down side streets. But the car stayed glued to me, a predator herding prey. At a red light, the driver pulled up alongside. I glanced and saw the snake-tattooed man behind the wheel. He grinned, slow and menacing, then rolled down his window. He lifted a finger, pointed at me, then drew it across his throat. The light turned green. He sped off into the night, leaving me trembling behind the wheel. When I got home, Clara was waiting. I told her everything, my voice shaking. "This is what I was afraid of," she whispered. "He's not Ryan. He doesn't need to scam you. He'll just bury you." But fear had shifted into something else inside me. Rage. The next day, I went to Alvarez's office. I laid the King of Spades on her desk. She stared at it, her jaw tight. "You understand what this means?" she asked. "I understand he's trying to scare me," I said. "No, he's warning you. Dario doesn't bluff. He's saying you're already in check. The next move is mate." I leaned forward, my voice low. "Then I'd better move first." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Arwen, I can only protect you so much. If you really want to go after him, you'll need more than court filings. You'll need something undeniable, something explosive. That night, Clara begged me to stop. He'll kill you, you're not listening. This isn't justice anymore, it's suicide." But I couldn't stop, not now. Because Dario had already made it personal. The card, the car, the message, they weren't just threats, they were challenges. And I wasn't going to fold. I whispered to myself as I stared out at the glowing city. "You think I'm your queen, Dario? Then let's play to the end." Explosive evidence. That's what Alvarez said I needed. Not suspicion, not whispers, not red string on my apartment wall. Something undeniable. So I went hunting. Clara thought I was insane. "Arwen, you've already poked the bear. If you keep digging, he won't just warn you, he'll bury you." I just shook my head. If I don't, then everything I've done, Ryan, the trial, the blacklist, it all means nothing. Dario walks away untouched, and I can't live with that. So I started small. A casino accountant who owed Alvarez a favor slipped me internal ledgers. On the surface, they were clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that only comes from someone scrubbing hard. But hidden between the lines were anomalies. Round number transfers to shell corporations. Deposits that vanished the same day into offshore banks. It was the skeleton of the laundering machine, but I needed flesh on the bones. That night, I followed one of Dario's mid-level men leaving the casino. He was sloppy, drank too much, talked too loud. He stumbled into a sidebar, and I sat 2 stools away, listening. He bragged to the bartender about Vega money flowing through construction contracts, about politicians who owed favors, about how the Queen's already marked. The words froze my blood. The Queen, that was me. When he staggered out, I slipped into the alley behind him. I pressed record on my phone, my hand trembling. His drunken rant spilled into the night, sloppy but clear. Enough to connect Dario's empire to politics, to construction, to me. It wasn't a confession, but it was leverage. The next morning, I brought the audio to Alvarez. She listened, face tight, tapping her pen against the desk. It's not airtight, but it's something, enough to rattle the cages. Then her eyes met mine. "But Arwen, if you go public with this, you won't just be circling Dario anymore. You'll be inside the cage with him." That night, as I left her office, I noticed a black car parked across the street. Same one that had tailed me before. Its headlights flared when I stepped out. I didn't run. I walked slowly, deliberately, my heart hammering. The window rolled down. Inside, a man's voice, smooth, deep, terrifyingly calm, drifted out. "You're playing a dangerous game, Ms. Monroe." I froze. I knew that voice. It was Dario Vega himself. The black car's window was open just enough for me to see his face. Dario Vega. Up close, he wasn't what I expected. No gold chains, no cigar smoke, no cheap bravado. He was composed, almost elegant, his eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "You've caused me a lot of trouble," he said calmly, as if we were discussing the weather. "Ryan was a fool, but you're different." My throat was dry, but I forced my voice steady. "Different enough to put cracks in your empire." A slow smile touched his lips. "Cracks? No, Ms. Monroe. You've drawn attention, and attention is bad for business. I could make you disappear tonight. But I admire something about you. Courage, maybe, or stupidity." "Maybe both," I said. He chuckled. "So tell me, what's your endgame? Do you really think you can bring down Dario Vega with a few files and a drunken confession?" I leaned closer, meeting his gaze. "I don't need to bring you down. I just need to show the world who you really are." His expression darkened, just slightly. "Truth is a fragile weapon. People don't want it unless it entertains them. By tomorrow, your little recordings could vanish. Judges can be bought. Politicians bend. And you're just one woman screaming into the desert wind." Anger surged in me, but I didn't let him see it. Maybe, but one woman can still start a fire. We stared at each other, the hum of the strip filling the silence. His driver shifted uncomfortably, but Dario never looked away. Finally, he leaned back in his seat. "Careful, little queen. Play too long and you'll forget. This game only ends when the king says so." The window rolled up. The car pulled away, sleek and silent, vanishing into the neon night. I stood there, heart pounding, fists clenched. He had spoken like the game was his, like I was just a piece. But he was wrong. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a player. And I swore to myself right then, I was going to finish this game, no matter the cost. The desert sunrise was pale and sharp the morning after I faced Dario Vega. I hadn't slept. His words replayed in my head like a curse. The game only ends when the king says so. But I was done letting him dictate the rules. Clara sat across my kitchen table, dark circles under her eyes. She'd stayed the night, terrified I'd vanish before morning. She watched me quietly as I spread out my files one last time. "This is it," I said. "I'm taking him down." Her voice cracked. "Arwen, this isn't just revenge anymore. It's war. And wars eat people alive." I looked at her, exhausted but steady. "Then let it eat me, as long as it takes him too." For the first time, Clara didn't argue. She just nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I made 3 calls that day. First to Alvarez. "I've got enough. Leaked ledgers, audio confession, connections to construction contracts. If I drop this to the press, it'll explode." Her sigh was long, heavy. "You realize once this goes public, you won't be safe anywhere. Safety's a luxury I don't get anymore," I told her. The second call was to the reporter who'd questioned Dario at the gala. "Get ready," I said, "because I'm about to hand you the biggest story in Vegas." And the third call, I never thought I'd make. It was to Ryan's former lawyer. He sounded stunned when I spoke. "Why are you calling me?" "Because your client's gone," I said flatly. "And the man who fed him is next. You wanted distance before. Now's your chance to survive. Give me what you know about Vega." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "You're crazy, Monroe, but I'll give you this. You've got teeth. Fine, meet me tonight. I'll tell you everything." I hung up, my hands trembling. The weight of the risk pressed on me, but underneath it all was a strange calm. This was the end game. That evening, Clara drove me to the meeting spot, a quiet diner off the highway, far from the strip's neon glow, the kind of place where secrets could be spilled between stale coffee refills. I slid into a booth, heart hammering. The lawyer arrived minutes later, pale and jittery. He leaned in close, whispering fast. "Vega's not just casinos. He owns people, judges, inspectors, even cops. But there's one thing he can't cover up: paper trails. And I've got copies." He slid a manila envelope across the table. "This is your bomb. Use it wisely. Once you light the fuse, there's no putting it out." I took the envelope, feeling the world shift in my hands. For the first time, I had it. The weapon that could actually topple him. And as I stepped back into the desert night, Clara at my side, I whispered to myself, "It's checkmate time." The envelope felt heavier than it should. Inside was everything: bank transfers, property contracts, payoffs to judges and cops, ties that linked Dario Vega's empire together like a spiderweb, proof that could turn whispers into headlines, headlines into handcuffs. I barely slept. By dawn, Clara sat beside me at the kitchen table, watching as I typed the email that would change everything. Subject line: for immediate release, Vega Holdings scandal. I attached the files, added the recordings, and CC'd every major outlet in the city. My finger hovered over send. Clara whispered, "Once you do this, there's no going back." I met her eyes. There never was. I clicked. The fuse was lit. By noon, Vegas was on fire. News alerts screamed across TV screens. Breaking evidence links Vega Holdings to massive money laundering operation. Reporters camped outside courthouses. Senators issued statements. Casinos scrambled to distance themselves. And Dario Vega? He stayed silent. Until that night, I returned to my apartment to find the lights off. My chest tightened. I knew before I turned on the lamp that he'd been there. On my table lay another card, the Ace of Spades, and across it, written in black ink, mate. The word hit like a blade. Behind me, a voice spoke, calm, cold. "You think you've won." I spun. Dario Vega stepped out of the shadows, tailored suit immaculate, his presence suffocating. "You've made noise," he said softly, "but noise fades. The game always belongs to the king." I forced myself to stand tall, even as fear tightened my throat. "Not this time. The world has seen you now. You can't hide behind shadows anymore." He studied me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. Not smug, not cruel, almost resigned. "You're right," he said, "and that's why this isn't the end." Then he stepped past me, opened my door, and vanished into the night. I stood frozen, the Ace of Spades trembling in my hands. He hadn't killed me. He hadn't even tried. Because Dario Vega knew something I was only just realizing. Revenge wasn't about the kill. It was about survival, about showing the world you couldn't be silenced. And in that, I had already won. Weeks later, indictments rolled in. Vega Holdings crumbled piece by piece. Politicians denied, judges scrambled, casinos panicked. Dario himself slipped underground, his empire bleeding in the open. As for me, I wasn't free. Not completely. I still checked my locks twice at night. I still jumped when cars followed too close. But I was no longer broken, no longer the girl who let Ryan steal her life. I was Arwen Monroe, and I had faced the King of Vegas, and lived.